Hi, and welcome back to another great episode of The Vision Within. Today, in just a moment, we're going to speak about communication in relationships. So we are your hosts. I'm Lori,
Loretta,
Lisa,
and I'm Katrina.
Awesome.
And please visit us on our YouTube channel, The Vision Within. We'd love to hear your comments also below. Thank you.
Well, I love this because we talk and we chat and we get all fired up in between episodes. And then, we just burst out, well, wait, stop. We have to get this on tape.
Somebody hit record.
So, that's right. Somebody hit record.
Absolutely.
So we were continuing on from our last episode of communication and just talking about what we're all working through. And we're working on relationships of all kinds and how communication differences or so forth impact us and how we can hit certain plateaus in relationship, and then all of a sudden there's miscommunication and we have to think, okay, how are we communicating? That shifts something and it propels us to the next level.
Yep, exactly.
That's so well stated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to speak a little
Sure,
bit?
yeah. So it's really interesting. Actually, Lori and I were having this conversation yesterday, and I actually had the same conversation with my partner, my boyfriend Jim. But basically, I think that when we're in relationships, maybe intimate relationships that are progressing, I think what happens is we get to a certain point where we hit a plateau, right? And so in order to go to that next level of growth, sometimes there's natural difficulties that occur from miscommunication, right? And so it's almost like I was kind of giving this analogy the other day of how when when a snake outgrows its skin, it sheds the skin and and it's brand new, right? The same kind of thing with the relationship. You get to a point where you're not fitting anymore,
right?
So you've got to go through that little bit of a shedding, and then you can move on to the next.
Almost like
stage.
I was seeing breaking through a membrane and kind of giving birth to a new level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you think of a recent example, since you're hot and heavy in your new relationship? Hi, Jim.
Hot and heavy in my new relationship.
Jim and Mark, hi.
Thank you for being our guinea pigs.
That's right.
Pat and
That's
I
right.
will say
Cheers.
hi to our potentials.
There you go.
Well, what happens is, okay, so basically we've been dating for about 5 months. And in the first
It
5
seems
months...
longer than that.
It does. In a good way.
She's like, girl, you aren't
I'm
even
not
living
going to
it.
edit this out.
I'm kidding. No.
In a good way. But basically what happens is when you're initially in that relationship, everything is great and you don't argue and, everything is just, oh yeah, whatever you want to do and this and that, But then I think, and we're really on our best behavior to be mindful in how we come across. But basically, like, for example, when we start going, when we start getting comfortable with each other, we don't pay as close to attention as how we're coming across, even though our intention is good. So here's an example. So last weekend or the weekend before, I can't remember, I was watching my 2 grandsons. Jim was over the house helping me. I had the boys outside in the baby pool, right? And they were playing, and Jim and I were sitting on the porch talking, and then he asked me a question, and just at the time, when I saw one of the kids take a nosedive, not in a good way, so I'm answering Jim as I'm running to the kids, so I actually kind of barked my answer out. And he's like, why are you talking to me like that? And I said, I didn't mean anything by it, but when I'm running to get one of the kids that just fell, because they're little, they're 3 and 2, but I still want to answer him. And so my comfort zone is so great with him that I don't have to sugarcoat or be like the nice voice all the time.
But you were observant.
But my intention.
You were observant as you were doing it, right? Before he even said anything, you realized you were barking?
No, I didn't until he said that, because my intention was trying to get to one of the kids.
Get the answer and get
exactly.
to the
But
right,
that's what's great about a relationship. They
Well,
can reflect back to us what we could have
exactly.
observed. Okay.
And but one point that I also told him is that I said when that happens, I said from an internal perspective, my intent is to always be kind. My intent is to always have good energy. I would never intentionally, bark at you. But I said, in order to not hurt your feelings, if that happens, pay attention to what's going around. If I'm trying to run after a kid that's just taking a nosedive in the pool, chances are, so kind of temper it a little bit before you get upset about it, right? So we're having these conversations about, because there's been some miscommunications, not only on the content of
Right.
the communication, but on the way that it's delivered. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's
The vibration of,
yes.
of it, as we talked in the last.
yeah. So just having to try to weed through that in new relationships to get you to the next level of understanding.
Do you think, and I'm just kind of visualizing the scene, Jim, I'm going to get in your head. Do you think that Jim felt like at that moment you were frustrated that he wanted your attention?
No, I don't feel like
Okay.
that at all. No.
And you were having to give it to your nephew?
Nope, I don't think that at all.
Or
I
your-
think that, we
your,
were sitting there
grandson.
having a really nice conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it was perfectly normal. And all of a sudden I jump up, I bark at him, and I go running in the next direction. So he's probably like, what the heck just happened here? Because
yeah.
and it's against my nature to like
Sure.
bark.
Right,
So it's
right.
like, kind of, he wasn't ready for that kind of response. you
Yeah,
know?
but what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is, what's the next step? For me, it's feeling each other's feelings. The empathy, the true
Sure,
empathy.
yeah.
So if you were to remote view here now, as we all are, and feel Jim's feelings in that moment when he said, you didn't have to bark at me, what do you, now we are assuming, but let's just play with this.
Well, I'm sure that he felt I was being disrespectful. It probably was very, very sudden, and he probably felt I was being disrespectful and unkind. But the thing is that, I don't have to feel his feelings.
Okay.
So, because what happens is that I might disagree with his reaction, but
Right.
it doesn't matter, because if he feels it, then it has to be true, right?
It's true for him.
It is true
Right,
for him,
yes,
right? And so,
yeah.
regardless, you respect that. And
Right.
so basically, if I just say, and meaning it, I'm truly sorry. That truly was not my intention, and I apologize for barking. I was trying to get the kids and listen to you, and I just really wasn't paying attention, and I sincerely apologize. So you have to just kind of take care
Hey,
of
he
that
could have
immediately.
held that in and not said anything, and then
Sure.
Exactly.
had it resented it.
Oh yeah, that's not good
and that's
either.
important.
Yeah.
I'm reading like 4 books right now, and one of them is
That's yours, that's me.
gosh,
Yeah.
is by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote like No Mun, No Lotus, Love Letters to the Earth, and he just has
Art of
this
Power.
wonderful perspective. And it's this little book that's kind of an easy read, and I'm about halfway through it, but it's about how to love. And it's from a Buddhist perspective. And one of the things it talks about is, and I'm going to transition this in just a second, and you'll laugh, but the first thing it talks about is being a student of the person that you're in the relationship with. And I think to some extent we do this without even realizing it. And how we notice when what causes someone to do something, what causes them distress,
Right.
what impacts their joy, what frustrates them, what their fears are, what their joys are, all of those things. And so when you are a student of the person that you're in the relationship with, then it's very different. And it even comes down to mannerisms or facial expressions or those kinds of things. And so when I read this, I kind of laughed because I realized that I do this in different ways. And my dog was there, and I looked down at her and I thought, oh my gosh, I even do this with Puff. And the more things happen, I can tell what causes her stress. I can tell what causes her excitement. I can tell what makes her itchy. I can tell by her tail and how she holds it what mood she's in. I can tell when she yawns that she's probably frustrated with me, sometimes annoyed, because we're not doing what she wants to do. And so just like I thought, oh my gosh, I have become the student of my pet because she can't talk to me.
Right.
And I really wondered, because being in a space where I'm like, okay, I'm moving toward readiness to be in a primary relationship with a man, and I'm thinking, when I date, when I am friends, am I as good a student of the other person as I am with my dog?
Loki, I don't know how
Hello.
you emerged because I had the
look,
doors
she opened the
closed.
door, yeah.
you did.
She wanted to be here.
She's our mascot.
Okay, now, yes.
Yes.
Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
No.
So I just kind of thought to myself, I wonder if I'm as good a student of people, of my friends, and I'm not sure. And I thought, well, gosh, that's something that I would like to pay more attention to, because
Right.
I think that I would be a better friend, a better daughter, a better pet owner, a better employee if I were to notice some of those things and take action accordingly. Because then I could be someone who can contribute to someone's joy and happiness. I can be someone who, understands what my response could be if I wanted to be supportive and that person is frustrated or angry or upset. And maybe they're not coming right out and saying, I'm really angry. Like, I didn't like the way you said that.
Right.
But I can tell by their posture, their facial expression, or that kind of thing. Sometimes you can see how your words land with someone. You can't always tell how they're feeling unless you're a student of that person. And that primary relationship, in my mind and in my heart, feels like it has the potential to be one of the great teachers of your life or of my life. And so I thought, wow, I really have an opportunity to be more mindful even before I get in a relationship. And that feels to me like part of being ready for that to appear in my life.
I love that you're talking about student of that relationship, or that you tuned into this talk about that.
Yes.
I hadn't thought of it that way. I always think of teachers, everyone's a teacher for me, but I hadn't thought of my reciprocal responsibility as being a student. I love that.
And that's so incredibly powerful, and you enunciated it so well, and you expressed it so well.
Yeah.
And that's part of which prayers I've got it sitting on in a card on my desk. Obviously, I don't say it enough. But
The 4 agreements, are you talking about that?
no, where it's Lord, please make me an instrument of thy
Prayer of
use.
St. Francis.
Prayer of St. Francis. And it says, first seek to understand before being understood. And I've really been working on that, but the way that you verbalized that was so perfect, because I have noticed just in doing more mindfulness practices and just finishing a course in mindfulness, that when I take the time to study and listen, like, I didn't need to take all these courses on how to communicate with my dog. It's just like another human being, that when you look in their eyes, it's just like us. You can tell exactly what they're saying. It's so funny because Mark and I have conversations with we're our dog voices. Our dog's voices. He'll say something, Coop, how's it going? And then he'll answer for Coop with Coop's thoughts. Yeah. And it's so funny. But I think that's so incredibly true. And one of the things we were talking about as far as relationships, I said I feel like it would be helpful if we went out together more often, because it's just like taking your dog to a dog park. There's only so much you can learn through books and everything else, and then they just have to be in a pack, and they have to be with their own kind. And it's very similar in relationships. When you know someone who has successfully navigated a relationship for almost 7 years and you're starting out, then it's good to hang around.
Sure.
Because then you can say things playfully that maybe you're working through and allow that other person to have their response, and then your partner sees, oh, hey, other people do it too. They've gone through this too. And it's like a big dog park.
My parents have been married over 50 years, and it cracks me up. Like I said, in reading this, I started noticing all of these things, and because this whole concept of being a student of the person that you're in a relationship with was like, holy cow. And I started noticing, like, my dad is really good at this. My mom will be, like, when my mother gets ready for something big, which my parents are getting ready to spend a month at a rental house in upstate Michigan to be with family in the month of July. And my mother is in full type A personality, life is a checklist mode. And so I was over there last night and I started to say something about, well, what if, because I was asking her, what food do you want me to bring, and those kinds of things. And I started to I was going to be combative, and this is how smart my dad is and how observant he is. He reached over and he just put his hand on my arm and he went, and I was like, okay, now's not the time. He's like, and in that look, I understood him to say, your mother is in full checklist mode. Unless it is about the checklist, let it go. Talk about it later.
Yeah.
She's full steam ahead. And I thought, you know what? He's right, because she won't even remember. She's going to do what she's going to do, and that's where she's at.
Well, what I saw just now in my visual of that is something that I think is paramount in the human condition, and that is reaction. And last episode, I talked about the Bible even programming us as humans. I'm not saying that I think it was a human that put this in here, that we are to do an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that it's okay to ping back reactionary in a reaction way what was pinged to you. Well, I say hogwash to that, because that's, as I said last time, is perpetual miscommunication, perpetual war, perpetual
retaliation,
conflict. And it's perpetual retaliation.
Yeah.
And about 15 years into my marriage, I'm no longer married, but about 15 years into my marriage, I saw this pattern, this eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. However, it really wasn't that. It was, I saw this ping pong table, and I saw either I pinged over the little ping pong or my ex pinged over the little ping pong. So let's say he pinged over something, a little ping pong. And I would ping back an eye for an eye. I would ping back the little ping pong. I wasn't going to ping back something worse. But what I was noticing was he would ping back then a tennis ball. And I'm like, whoa. So I would ping back a tennis ball. Well, then he would ping back a hard ball.
Yeah.
And I would ping back a hard ball. And he'd ping back a cannonball, and it would break the ping pong table.
Yeah.
And where were we then?
Right.
So, like your dad, where he touched you, I realized I didn't want the volcano to erupt. I was feeling horrible because he was attacking me. But I didn't want to verbalize the peeing back. I didn't want to react with words and action either. So I just stayed silent, and either stoically or I walked away. And eventually I started to become aware of my feelings and thoughts, and that I had a choice to change those as well. Not just a choice to not say something, or a choice not to do something, or to do something and say something. But I also had a choice to choose my feelings and my thoughts. And now I'm realizing, hey, wait a minute, let's go back even further. What comes before the feelings, thoughts, words, and action in a relationship? I have discovered it's frequency.
Energy.
Oh yeah, totally.
Energy,
Yes.
frequency, and vibration.
Absolutely.
Well, the vibration is the result of, the feelings and thoughts and words and action. But the frequency is before the vibration. And by golly, I'm starting to realize I can
Pick up on that.
unilaterally choose my frequency, which unilaterally changes the whole communication between myself and the co-creator.
Well, and that comes back to Kat's saying of being a student, and something I just heard the other day saying, we don't really understand the power yet of listening and being present for someone, because we usually listen to respond.
Right.
We don't listen to learn.
Right.
We listen to respond.
True.
Or we don't listen to learn that we no longer have to do that recurring pattern
Right.
of reaction.
Right.
If we stayed still,
Right.
and got into the silence or the present moment, the space in between the thoughts, then we can actually choose our frequency at that stage.
Well, some of the most powerful experiences I've had when I've either gone to a breathwork retreat or different silent retreats, is all of the communication you're aware of. It was really interesting, especially my last mindfulness retreat. When we first came in the room, even though it was silent, it was extremely loud. Extremely loud. Everyone's thoughts were going crazy and the vibration was loud. So our hearts were all communicating. And at a breathwork retreat, we kind of got in a line and we had to go to each person and just communicate our feelings to them. And it was so powerful and so emotional because our heart, as we're going through this process of all the work that we're doing, just is blossoming our heart and removing all of these layers. And so our heart is communicating more powerfully and louder than it's ever communicated. And I think we need less words.
Right.
We
And
need less words.
just harkening back to some of the self-help books I bought years and years ago in the mid-term of my marriage, the psychologist would say, and it's still so applicable, when you're in a new relationship, you're the flower, he's the flower, and you automatically water and give it enough sunshine, give it enough water, give it enough attention and care. It's just automatic in that romantic stage. Yet we can do that during the whole relationship. And, we're all flowers. We need enough water and sunshine to blossom fully.
Well, if you're an ongoing student of your relationships, then you're constantly learning and you're adjusting based on what you know about that person.
Right.
So I feel that would make a lot of moments be more impactful and be more heart-centered.
Yeah.
So, because I will tell you, I noticed that the times that I ping back a football and spike it, I'm like, ah! When I get reactive is when someone hits on or goes directly against or shoots an arrow directly at who I believe myself to be, whether it's indirect or direct. So if someone thinks, like for example at work, if someone says, if I say, what about, if we're in a group meeting and I say, what about this? What if this were possible? What impact would that have? And somebody else says, that's ridiculous, because there's one gentleman in our group he's incredibly direct. And I had to learn that about him. But at first, he would say, that would work if da-da-da-da. Like, in the way it came off was, if you were smart enough to understand. Yeah. So apparently that's a big button for me because I wanted to ping back at him and I didn't there, but later on I was like, you know what? I didn't, but that's when I felt myself. Ooh, I had that ball. I was ready to spike it, honey. I wanted to shove it down his throat. And I thought, you know what? When my buttons get hit the most, it's when someone challenges a direct belief I have about who I am.
Is that that makes me think of when we were talking just a minute ago about not styles of languages. So Mark and I are very aware we speak different languages, and we both have had to work a lot on, are we coming from a technical language? Are we coming from a science language? Are we, because love language is universal.
Yes, it is.
And but sometimes when people are saying something very direct like that, would it be helpful to bring that to their attention, redirect in some way? Like for example, so you say, he says something that challenges you, that makes you think that it's because you aren't smart enough or something, and maybe you say, look at, I haven't had experience in that, because that, just the awareness of experience might really help him to work with customers, because we obviously we don't have the all. Mark is the funniest thing. He's like, I would hope we don't have the same experiences, because then we wouldn't need each other.
Well, right.
One of us would be
How boring would that
redundant.
be?
Well, I love what you typically say, and that is, thank you for your feedback. What ideas do you have? And that is what Martin Luther King said. War does not drive out war, only peace does that. Hate does not drive out hate, only love does that. So the only way to transmute the aspect of yourself that feels injured from that comment, and you had a co-creator that made you aware of that aspect of yourself, this is what I feel anyway, that was still injured and wanted to be transmuted into pure health, that small child, is to love it unconditionally. So when we say and do, it must be creating with unconditional love in all moments, or else it's going to exacerbate
Absolutely.
and amplify that which we hated it to begin with. So the only way to heal it is to unconditionally love it, to actually love our enemy.
Well, by being a student of that relationship, what I learned about this person is that they don't respond well to any kind of structure that they didn't create. If they are a co-creator in something, he'll be all in. When he's not, so as a result, he can be very resistant to new ideas. Once I understood that about him, I understood how he responded in group settings. It wasn't me. It was how he functions and operates within our team, and everyone just kind of like, well, that's who
So
he is.
how can you, rather than pinging back a football, what could you have
Well,
done
I don't
now?
ping back a football anymore.
Right. But I mean, we
And I
all
didn't
know
in
what
the
a
moment.
pinging back a football looks like because we've
Sure.
done it a million times
Sure.
in our human condition. But stay silent, I guess, if you haven't come up with words that are with love. But in hindsight, now that you understand him, and let's say he did that again, what would you say? Just to help the viewers and myself,
Sure.
so we can.
I would have asked for clarity. I would have said, okay,
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
hearing is this. I don't think I'm understanding your contribution here. Can you explain that a
So
little
you're
bit further?
putting the fault on you, which doesn't make him defensive, which
Sure.
is good. Because when we defend ourselves, then that makes the other person feel like they're at fault.
So that's being, in my
That's
mind,
being loving.
it's
what you
being
just
loving.
said.
It's also being a student.
Yeah,
Because I'm
yeah.
like asking for
I
clarity.
love that.
Versus making an assumption.
Yeah. What do you think, Loretta?
I think we've really gone full circle today.
I think
Okay.
We
Why
have,
not?
yeah.
Yeah.
You want to summarize, Kat? You're always so
Sure.
good at that.
Well, we talked about a lot. We talked about the frequency, feelings, thoughts, and actions, and that whole cycle. We talked about how we view our relationships, and that there comes a point where we are invited to work through differences in experience to kind of take us to the next level in a relationship. We talked about being students of our relationships and really understanding the other person and kind of what inspires them and what scares them and what makes them nervous so that we can enrich our lives through our relationships. Would that be about it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Katrina.
I'm Lori.
Loretta.
And I'm Lisa, and please visit us on our YouTube channel, The Vision Within, and let us know how you feel about these episodes and if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss in the future. Till next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.